Welcome to Growth Beyond Boundaries, the podcast by the Ad Astra Coach Alliance that explores the transformative power of coaching, leadership, and innovation. I'm your host, Andy Huckaba, and I'm so excited to have you join us. Here at the Ad Astra Coach Alliance, we believe growth isn't just a goal, it's a journey. Whether you're a leader striving to inspire your team, a professional seeking your next breakthrough, or an organization ready to transform your culture, this podcast is for you. Each segment, we bring you stories, strategies, and insights from our team of seasoned coaches and leaders across industry. Together, we'll discover innovative approaches to fostering a culture built on success, accountability, and collaboration, rooted in both challenging and compassionate coaching practices. So if you're ready to go beyond boundaries and discover what's possible, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Coaching is a partnership designed to help people think more clearly, see new possibilities, and move forward with greater intention. It is not primarily about receiving advice or being told what to do. At its best, coaching creates space for reflection, honest conversation, thoughtful challenge, and meaningful action. And what coaching feels like matters. A good coaching relationship should feel safe enough for someone to be candid about what is working, what is difficult, and what they may not yet understand. So today, Teresa and Phyllis, let's begin with what coaching really is, what the experience of coaching is like, and how someone can select the right person to partner with them in the process. So where do you want to start? Phyllis?
Well, as I'm looking at it, I think one of the good places to start is really at the beginning with what is coaching really? And why would I even consider it? And in what you just said in your intro, I think a lot of it is when you almost feel lost. I can't get out of my own head. I seem to be circling around something, and I start to at least recognize that, and I don't know where to go. And so I would say that would be one of the signs, is to pay attention to your own thought process, and maybe you don't know it at the time, but that's when coaching can help.
Teresa, what do you think?
What about you all?
Yeah, I was thinking about what the question about what coaching is. And one of the easiest definitions of what coaching is really a thinking partner. And how many of us actually have the luxury at any point in our lives, really, but especially in the times that we're in, where things move as quickly as they do and the pressures mount, where we can actually just stop and take a breath. And the real benefit of coaching is having another human being whose sole purpose is to sit with you and listen to you and give you the space to think in the way that makes most sense for you. So there's no pressure that the other person's not giving you advice. They're not telling you what to do. You're not feeling like you have to defend a position. It's really just about thinking through those dynamics of whatever place you might feel stuck, or maybe it's a place you're excited to go. Maybe it's something you want to do in the future and you don't know what the next steps are, but to really just have a moment to take a breath, reflect with another person who's so deeply listening to you that they hold your outcome in mind, whatever it is you want to accomplish. Their responsibility is to hold that for you and make sure that you get that result at the end of the conversation, and do a lot of exploration through a lot of questions along the way. So I always think that definition, and we heard that first through somebody who we all worked with, Marcia Reynolds, who describes coaching as a thinking partner. And I think that's really one of the best definitions of coaching that I've ever heard. It just makes so much sense.
I agree. In a simple way for us to kind of grasp it and understand. Use the word space, and we've used that a lot just recently with in calls with clients, and the idea of creating space. where the client can reflect, the client can think, the client can try out ideas. The client can vent.
Mhm.
That's been used a few times, right? And the benefit of that space allows that partner to explore things and look at things, and I think gain clarity on what's next for them, gain clarity on the steps they want to take in the future, um, gain clarity on how they want to show up.
I agree. I think space is one of those funny words that we toss around out in our culture now. You see it on social media. And what does space really mean? So maybe it would be helpful for us to sit here and talk about when we say we're creating space, what is that? It's not some nebulous term. In some ways, it's literally just asking a question and then giving people silence so they can actually think. They don't feel pressure. They don't feel like they have to come up with an answer. They don't even have to feel like they're where their thinking is well formulated. That it's so space can literally mean just silence, or space is I am normally running so fast from task to task to
Mm.
task that I don't have an hour in my schedule where I can stop with another person and literally create the space where I can have the conversation. I'm curious, when the two of you think about space, how else would you describe what we're doing as a coach when we create space?
Just to piggyback on you said, I don't even have an hour. My first thought when you asked that question, what does space? I think for some right brain people, it's time. It's time to decompress, time to relax your brain, time to gather yourself. And when you can allow yourself that time during coaching, as if you can potentially then gain time down the road. But because I think people tend to think, I don't have space, I don't have the time to do this. That's just going to take another hour out of my day. But it's a time maybe that will allow you to breathe, even if that's what it does. It just lets you breathe. In fact, I'm assuming some you guys have had that experience of after you get going with coaching, your clients will just say, this is a time I look forward to.
Yeah.
And that's when you realize they know that they are going to be able to decompress, think, not be rushed, speak at their own rate. Because again, that on the other end, the coach is listening. But I think another word for space is time.
I agree with all of what both of you said. This idea of space is nebulous, and it's critical for the person who is running full speed, who is in the forest and can't see the forest because of the trees. There's a good a phrase that's used all the time, and yet it's very true that the ability to step back, to breathe, to consider, to think, to um, work with a partner uh, to make sense out of things and to create clarity again. I think that space allows for that. And I think it's a creative space that we oftentimes, when we're running so hard, we don't allow for our brains to be creative, to explore. We're just running to try to get it done. This space allows for that container that we can do that.
I had a participant in a training one time attempt to define coaching on their own with their own definition. And their definition was coaching allows another person to take a spider web of thoughts and make sense of them. And I was like, that's maybe one of the better definitions of coaching I've had, because that is how we come in, is we have this spider web or a tangled web of ball of thoughts, and it's like to just
That's perfect.
detangle them. And I know
Yeah.
and understand, like, what's the beginning of this one and what's the end of this one. I just thought that was a really brilliant definition. And the other thing I was thinking while you guys were talking, it really struck me that when we talk about space, it is a place where you don't feel like you have to perform. The release of pressure where you feel like you have to perform or be competent is not there. I think we feel like we have to perform all the time. We always have to look like we're confident. We always have to look competent. We have to, if we're leading teams, they need to look to us and we need to be demonstrating this competence and confidence. And we feel this pressure like we're on a stage all the time. And in coaching, you get to come in and just let all of that down, and there is no performance. There is literally no performance. And that in and of itself is space. Like when you don't feel like I have to perform for you, that I can just be who I am in all of its realest forms, and you're not going to judge me, and you're not in any way going to think less of me because I don't have all of this thought out
Hmm.
and am not perfect. I mean, dropping that performance, it's huge.
Yeah. And what relationships and what scenarios do people have that release that need to perform aside from coaching? I mean, coaching is really that container that just takes care of that. So I love that explanation. The other thing, yeah, I like these spider web
That
metaphor. I
was
think
good.
that's a great one.
It's good.
We talk oftentimes about the venting, what happens a lot of times with at the beginning of coaching discussions is we'll ask a typical question like, "What's on your mind?" And it's just like blah, right? It's just
Absolutely.
like they just release it all. And there's a comfort for them in being able to do that, right? And as a coach, we're listening but we're not trying to pick one, because one of our follow-up questions might be, you mentioned an awful lot of things right now. Right now, what's most important to you?
Beautiful.
And it doesn't take very long for them to say, well, of all the stuff I just, blah out on the table, what's most important to me is this. You go, okay, so let's move forward. Does it make sense to move forward with that? You always give them the choice, you always give them the peace. But it's amazing how quickly they zero in on what's most important to them right now.
I always lovingly
And
refer to that as verbal vomit.
Yeah, right. Verbal
Spider web
vomit.
of thoughts is probably better than verbal vomit, but that is what it's like sometimes. And we need to like that whole pressure of all of it building up and be able to say it. But what you said, Andy, is what coaches do, is it's like we don't we'll let you vent. You can tell the story, you can give us all the detail, but then our partnership helps you sort through what's most important. It helps you gain focus so that when we're coming up with the rest of the conversation or the outcome, we're having the conversation that's most important to you, and we help you sort through that. And that's the job of a coach, is to do a lot of sorting and sifting and understanding what's most important, and what do you want to make progress on, and where do you want to be, and how do you want to show up, and what are the next steps that you want to take. And that's the beauty of the partnership of the coach, is that they take hold. I'm doing this sort of lightly, take hold of the process while you hold the content. All the stuff that's important to you is yours, but we guide and direct and get you from where you are to where you want to be. And that's a little bit different focus of a conversation than we have typically with other people.
and I don't want to go down that metaphor, but it is funny about the verbal vomit as you were
Uh-huh.
saying that. And that even before we can get to that question of which is most important, Another thing I find that they say after the verbal vomit, and this is a real metaphor, they'll say, whew, that felt good to let all of that out.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then, and when you think about it, to play along this terrible metaphor, but accurate, it's almost like, who do you want to be sick in front of, if that makes any sense?
Mm.
And, you know, they know that after they do that and let it out, they know that there's somebody there to, I don't want to say hold your hand because that's not necessarily what you're going to do, but they allow themselves to be vulnerable to let it out in front of somebody, which implies they trusted you to do that. And they know that you will take that information. And sometimes after they let it out, there's nothing about what they let out that they want to talk about. But now their head is clear. And again, they were not ashamed to let it out. They were just comfortable letting it out, knowing that that is part of that space and that time that we can now move on.
Yeah. That release,
That
I
release.
think, for most of my clients is absolutely essential for them to then be able to focus in the conversation and begin to make progress in that coaching conversation, that they have to release to be able to get there. That I think early on when we were training as coaches 15 years ago, the question was essentially, well, what do you want to accomplish today? Like that's the first question we would ask. And by asking that first question, most people don't know what they want to accomplish. They don't really know until they get rid of the baggage. They don't really know what direction they want to go in. And so asking that, well, what do you want out of this today? It's almost too early. And so we're giving our listeners a sense of what coaching looks like and feels like. What else do we want to say to kind of establish this foundation?
Well, there may be more to establish the foundation, but there was something else about that experience that I think is really important. When you, if we want to use the continue the terrible metaphor of verbal vomit, once you verbally vomit, I'm not going to say, oh, you shouldn't feel that way. It's not that big a deal. I'm not going to discount what you just shared with me. And I think this is, again, a very big difference between having a conversation with a coach and maybe having a conversation with a best friend or a colleague or a supervisor. You know, we're not going to judge. There's no judgment attached. Your feelings are your feelings and they are valid. And giving you space to get them out without anybody coming back to say, oh, you shouldn't feel that way. This is really not that big a deal. Like, I don't know why you're doing, feeling this way, or, like it's everything is validated because it is valid. And that's a big differentiator between a coaching conversation and other kinds of conversations. You're not going to feel invalidated in a coaching conversation. It doesn't mean you might not feel challenged on some assumptions or interpretations later in the conversation, but you should never feel judged.
And I think that's kind of bringing us around then to one of the other questions, Andy, you posed at the very beginning is, how then do we pick that person who will allow us that space, that time, will be the person to be there when we have our verbal vomit, our tangling of the threads. And so I'm just, how do we even go about picking somebody who we would feel that vulnerable in front of?
Yeah, great bridge there. And yes, how do we know? And so, I think there are multiple things. Number one, how do you find a coach?
True, yeah.
Right? How do you know where to look? It's kind of like I had a question on email from one of our coaching friends earlier today. How do you find a bookkeeper for a small business?
Hmm.
And we used to say, well, go to the yellow pages or go ask your friends, right? Your network, or
Or Google it.
yeah. And so maybe let's start with, where do you find us? What are some of the tools that people might use to be able to identify who they might talk to?
Well, it's a great question. There are a lot of coaches out there. I, obviously you can start with Google or you can go to any LinkedIn, any platform and do a search, and you're going to find a lot of people. That might feel too overwhelming for some people. I think another tool that you have at your disposal, so we're all members, and Phyllis and I are on the board of ICF Heartland, which is the Professional Coaches Association and the local chapter in Kansas and Missouri. We have a Find a Coach feature on our ICF Heartland website, and International Coaching Federation .org. The global site also has a Find a Coach feature. So you can go on those websites, you can do a little narrowing, like here's the kind of coach I'm looking for, here's the kind of outcome I want, here's the genre, whether it's life or leadership or executive. You can narrow your search a little bit. So tools like that can be
Yeah.
really helpful to narrow the field, because I do think it is pretty overwhelming out there.
Yes.
I
We'll
I
be
also
we'll be sure to put those links in the
oh
show
good.
notes so people can follow those. They don't have to remember exactly what you just
Yes,
said.
yeah.
So,
Thank
yeah,
you. I think narrowing the field in that way can be really beneficial and maybe not feel quite so overwhelming.
In fact, I was saying it in jest as far as Google or Yellow Page for those of those, if you can find one,
Eh,
because that might be the list of names. I would co-sign what Teresa just said, that there are not only a lot of coaches out there, there are a lot of people who say that they are coaches. And I
mm,
think you got to differentiate between that. And so I would also co-sign the go-to professional sources as tools like the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, and there are others, but that's pretty much the granddaddy of them. And look to those sources
yeah,
for certified coaches that have gone through specific trainings, and that can kind of take some of that overwhelm out too. Like instead of just a name being posted, go somewhere else where it's a trusted source. So I would say you look for a trusted source as a tool, and oftentimes that's where you can find somebody's bio, what they specialize in. Like Teresa mentioned some of the specializations. So I would definitely co-sign if you go to Google, type what are the trusted sources of
Mm.
coaches.
right.
Well, and to
So,
get this even more, sorry, and Andy, to interrupt you, but
yeah,
I was thinking just to get even more technical than that, um, looking for a credentialed coach is a really good way to ensure that that coach has rigorous training, mentoring. They have done all of the requirements that they need to be credentialed, including subscribing to a code of ethics and a set of competencies that have been defined as excellent coaching. So specifically, you would be looking for letters behind somebody's name, either ACC, PCC, or MCC. Those are the three credentials and the three credential levels that are offered through the International Coaching Federation. There are a couple of other credentialing bodies out there, but the ICF is the predominant one, and it is a global organization that's credentialing coaches in multiple countries across the world. So those letters, ACC, PCC, and MCC, means that they have gone through a credentialing process with the International Coaching Federation. So you can assume the code of ethics, the core competencies, certain mentor coaching, certain levels of training, etc.
yeah.
Mhm.
Coaching comes in a lot of different flavors, doesn't it?
Mm.
And we consider ourselves, the three of us, leadership coaches or executive coaches. That's kind of the world
Mhm.
we play in. But there are also uh, health and fitness coaches. There are, here, help me,
ADHD,
ADHD.
family
Wellness,
systems, financial coaching, relationship coaching,
career
life
coaching.
coaching. Yeah.
Yeah.
Career life. Yeah.
So lots of different types of coaching. And perhaps what's important is um, when you are looking for a coach to begin to understand what kind of coaching you're really looking for, right? But understanding that they do come in a lot of flavors and that the credentialing piece of this is critical because it ensures a code of ethics, it ensures confidentiality, it ensures professionalism, and those things become important to whomever is being coached in terms of the reliability and safety and productivity of that coaching relationship.
Mhm. I want to add kind of the opposite of what you shouldn't look for. So I think it's important to understand what are you hoping to get out of it? Is this a life issue? Is it a health and fitness issue? Are you struggling with ADHD and need an ADHD coach? What kind of coaching are you looking for? But I would also encourage you not to assume that you need to be coached by somebody who has technical expertise in
Right.
what you do. So let's say you're in law enforcement, for instance, you don't necessarily need to be coached by somebody who has a law enforcement background, for instance. Coaching the process is about helping people change, helping them understand their situation, helping them find paths forward based on where they are. And that is less about technical expertise than it is about the process of change. So I think we hear a lot of people saying, well, I'm in finance, so I need somebody with a finance background. They're the only person that could understand. Or I work for a tech company, so I have to have somebody with a tech company background. Or I'm an entrepreneur, so I have to have somebody who has an entrepreneurial background. That is
Or
not
I'm a CEO and I need someone who has been
I
a
need,
CEO before.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would hold open that that isn't always the best place to go because sometimes those relationships turn more into consulting than they do into coaching. And coaching looks much more like I've been there, I've done this. Let me understand your situation and then give you advice based on what I've experienced. And
Consulting looks like that. Yeah.
consulting looks
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And here's the tricky part. I think when people feel stuck, that's what they think they want. Like they're like, ooh, if I could just find this perfect person out here who's done what I've done and they're successful, they can just hand me all of the beautiful package of things that I need to go do, and then I can go do them. Oftentimes, that is not what we need to change and get better because it's not somebody handing us a solution that doesn't, because sometimes that solution doesn't work for us, or we're scared to go implement that
Mm.
solution. And just being handed something, it takes away all the friction where growth and change happen. So I would just be careful if you're looking for somebody, be clear, do you want a consultant who is really going to tell you what to do based on what you need? Or do you really want a coach who's really going to challenge your thinking, help you transform in your growth, and help you approach things in a way that are consistent with your strengths and your circumstances versus on somebody just handing you some kind of package that happened to work for them?
Right. Good differentiation. Okay, so let's say you've found a way to identify coaches, which we've just talked about. And now you're starting to interview those coaches to determine who is the best coach for you. Let's talk about that process, what that looks like. Phyllis, you want to
Well, first,
start?
I would just like to reiterate what you said. Before you pick a coach, I would recommend talking to several before. And by several, one, two, or three. I mean, two or three. Um, because part of that
Phyllis,
coaching,
Teresa, and Andy, right? Yeah.
because that coaching relationship is truly a relationship.
Mm.
And when you do interview them, ask them, how do they go about coaching? And I'm not sure if that was your question, Andy, but it's what I would recommend interviewing them.
What does
And then
coaching look
asking
like with
them,
you? Yeah.
yeah, what does coaching look like with you? Um, who are some of you, not who, but how do you go about coaching other people that you've coached? What is your background? What is your certification? So you would ask some of those types of questions, but you're also looking for how do the two of you even relate as
Mm.
you are speaking.
The chemistry,
Oftentimes,
right?
yeah, because oftentimes during those interviews, the coaches are demonstrating their coaching styles in some way, shape, form, or fashion. I've always done that. I try to do a little bit without telling them this is what I'm doing. I normally will say that at the end, like what we just did gives you a taste for my style.
Mm.
So you do want to look for like a style and who you resonate with. And like Teresa said, it doesn't have to be somebody who's in the same, who's had the same professional background as you. It's like picking a doctor. When you go to a doctor, we don't normally have any doctor skills to compare with. We're really looking for, do I trust telling this doctor my issues? How do I feel around them? How do they treat me? And I believe that because they have the certification behind their name, MD, DO, whatever it is, I trust that they have been trained properly. But that relationship is where the interview comes in handy, that you can literally hear them speak. Sometimes you coach with people face to face. Oftentimes it's more like Zoom, Teams, but it could also just be over the phone. Sometimes coaches just coach over the phone. So you want that rapport or that feeling. So also let your gut be a guide too, not just your gut, but how are you feeling during this conversation with a person? So that's one thing I would say as you start to speak with them, start looking for those types of things. Other
I
thoughts?
think no, I think you just said everything that I would have said. I think it is about the relationship and it's like, do I feel comfortable? Will I be comfortable verbally vomiting in front of this person that I'm choosing? And do they listen more than they talk? Are they present with me? Are they distracted? I'd really be paying attention to all of those things in the sense that how I feel when I walk away from that relationship. I think your gut is going to tell you like this feels like a really good match or this doesn't feel like we're going to gel.
Yeah. I think there's also in line with that how I feel. Do I feel heard?
Mm.
Do I feel listened to? Do I feel cared for in this dialogue? I think that is really important to the relationship. And it's part of the trust, right? That if somebody walks away saying, no, I'm just a number
Mhm.
versus I'm a person, that really does matter. And so we, we oftentimes start um, our dialogues with potential clients um, with a chemistry call. We call it that. It's a
Mhm.
chemistry call. It's to see whether we match up from a relational standpoint, whether there is the chemistry there to be able to move forward. And that's on both sides, right? That the client may come into it and say, I just didn't feel like it felt very flat to me. The coach may say something similar like, I just don't feel it here, and may make a
Mhm.
recommendation to another coach. So that chemistry call is really important on the front end because if you do that and do it well, um, then it really sets the table for a strong coaching relationship moving forward.
Mhm.
So be careful if you decide to engage a coach if they don't start with a chemistry discussion, even if they don't call it that, be careful with that because it's so important to make sure that you're talking together, not one person talking at the other one.
Hmm. Well, and to your point, this is part of our code of ethics. If somebody comes in and we don't feel like we can serve that person to the best that they need or in a way that they need, it's part of our code to refer to somebody. So when you're looking at a coach who's been credentialed, who is using the code of ethics as part of their practice, they'll be honest about that up front and say, I don't think I'm the best fit for you, but I have somebody else I could refer you to. And maybe you refer to two or three other people that you have in your network so they can interview someone else. But it's part of our responsibility to be honest to people, whether we feel like we're the right match or whether we feel like we're not a good match.
And I can give two examples of that also. I have one colleague that, quite frankly, I've gotten clients from her. The initial call was to her, but she strongly believes, and I have adopted this practice too. When someone just reaches out to me out of the blue, maybe, or not out of the blue, after I do the interview, I will ask them, have you spoken to any other coach? And then would give them, especially after we've talked, give them another name. And I've had a colleague who has done that. She has said, here's another person you should talk to because she believes that you should be at a point of choice. And again, because it's about chemistry, talk to someone else. And so we have been resources for each other. Another thing is in the interview, as Teresa just said, it's part of our ethics to even see if we are even in the right area with you. I had someone who I had coached before and they knew it, excuse me. And then they came back to me and they said, well, here's my situation now. And the more they talked, they were describing they needed some technical experience.
Yes.
In an area. It really wasn't coaching. It was more of a technical skill that they needed. And so I passed them on to somebody who I knew specialized in that area. They didn't know that. They thought, well, you've taught me before and you've coached me before. You can do this. And it's like, no, not really. But I know somebody who can. So it's not ethical for me to say, yeah, I can coach you on that. No, that's when somebody needs to even be led that no, what you're describing is you need training or you need consulting. And so a good coach will also be open to that.
I'm a
I
big
also think
believer.
on that.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just partnering or following on the back of what you just said. I think any coaching chemistry session that ends with a high pressure sales situation would be something that would make me nervous because I do what you just described, Phyllis, is, how do you feel about this relationship? Take some time. If you haven't talked to other coaches, please go do that. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here when you decide to move forward. If you decide to move forward. So I think if there's a high pressure sale at the end, that would be just I would take note of that. I think good coaches are really going to give you the autonomy to be able to choose the best choice for you. And I would, if I were a consumer looking for a coach, would be nervous about a high pressure sale at the end of a chemistry conversation.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, I, I'm a big believer that coaching is not um, best in a remedial situation. Remedial meaning someone who is having a performance problem or some type of a problem at work and they are being told that they need coaching to do that. Okay, so the reason why it doesn't work very well in a remedial situation is while the coach might be very willing to coach that person, the person's not all in because they're just being told they have to do it. It's not a development or growth type of environment. It's a try to keep from getting fired type of environment. And so,
Right.
I've rejected potential coaching clients in the past who have been remedial situations. And I've just said, I perhaps am not the best person to coach you. And I've also, one of the yellow flags is if it's not that person coming to you, but it's somebody in HR or whatever saying, we need a coach for this person because they're crashing and burning or they're whatever. They're not performing well, and this is part of their disciplinary thing. And my response is that's not a coach.
I think the only time that works is when that person is invested. When they're like, I see it. I see it as a career limiting behavior. It feels really important to me to change it. And I see it and I understand the impact and I am willing to do the hard work. I think that is one situation where I think those coaching engagements can work when the person is really invested. But if they're not invested and they're just checking a box off to say they did something, I agree. We're really starting behind the eight ball in a situation like that.
So you've had these conversations. You're starting to have conversations with coaches. What are some of the key questions you should ask a coach in that conversation?
Well, I think there's some technical questions that probably people want answered. So we can address those in a moment. But I think the bigger questions are, what's it like to work with you? What have other people who've worked with you said was different when you were done working with them? What's your coaching philosophy? I have a lot of people who will ask me that question. You might want to ask about credentials. What level are you credentialed at? What does your training look like? Asking those kinds of technical questions. You might also ask about pacing. How frequently do you meet? How do you meet? Obviously, people always want to know about cost. So talking about those technical things. And no coach should hide any of those bunnies. Those should always be easily answered questions all the way down to cost. So those are a few that I would say.
It's kind of interesting when you were saying that. I find that most people don't even know enough to ask those types of questions.
I think that's why we're talking about it, Phyllis.
Yeah, it's almost like they kind of come and say, I think I need something. I talked to my HR, they recommended coaching, or I had a friend that had coaching. So one thing is, just if that's just all you have, even ask them, can you tell me a little bit about what coaching is and what it does? And then get to that big question that you said, Teresa, and what's your philosophy and how do you go about doing it? So and that's why I think it's also important to when you make those calls, to pay attention to the questions that the coach asks, because they do know, or they should know, what coaching is. So pay attention to their questions. Don't feel that you have to be armed with a whole lot of questions going into it, because we understand that most people don't know unless they've already had a coach before. They don't know what they're getting into.
Yeah.
They kind of have a sense. They've learned, they've observed some of their coworkers or friends who have benefited, but they themselves don't know enough yet. So be open to or good coaches will start to ask you questions like, what would you like to achieve? How did you first learn about coaching? They'll ask you some things to play off of. What do you want to get out of it? What would be your best hope out of this? Where have you found in development opportunities? How do you best operate? Because one of the questions that I'll ask every now and then. I don't always ask it until we get into coaching, once I'm selected, but every now and then we let them know, while coaches will provide that psychological safety, it doesn't mean you're not going to be challenged. And asking them, how comfortable are you being challenged?
Mm.
So I don't always ask that in the chemistry call, but from time to time I will, based upon the conversation. But listen to those questions that the coach has, because they're the expert in coaching. So don't feel pressure that you have to have all those questions, but those technical questions are very good to start off with. And then as the conversation, in fact, this is how you know you're onto something with a good coach, possible coach, is that conversation feels kind of effortless,
Mhm.
and they feel at ease, or you can feel yourself opening up that you had not even expected to ask. But that conversation is a smooth indication of how you're going to talk with one another.
I think I love that you pivoted to what the coach would ask. We covered some things, what the person looking for a coach would ask, but the coach would ask um, questions and perhaps make statements around expectations. You know, what do you expect from this coaching relationship? And the coaches, and here are expectations I have for this relationship to go well. It might
Mhm.
have to do with the regularity of coaching sessions. It might have to do with preparation. It might have to do with how you show up to a coaching session. There are several different factors here, but these are things that if you're interviewing coaches and they're asking your questions around that, and in some cases making statements, um, they're helping you understand what this relationship could look like.
Beautiful.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of things here. Let's wrap a bow around this and just kind of reflect a little bit about what you think has been most important in this conversation to try to help our listeners understand essentially how to pick a coach. Teresa, you want to start?
I think the takeaway is for coaching to be its most valuable and effective, there is likely going to be vulnerability involved. And choosing a partner with whom you feel safe being vulnerable is probably the most important piece of this. I repeat frequently that growth only happens in discomfort. And if you are learning and growing and stretching and trying to meet an outcome or a goal that you've not been able to do on your own, that alone indicates that some growth and some stretch is required. So if you could do it on your own, you would have done it. The only reason you go to a coach is because you're running up against a barrier or a challenge or something that you find yourself, some pattern that you find yourself continuing to come up against that you just can't overcome on your own. If that's the case, which it almost always is in coaching, then you're going to be vulnerable. They just sort of go hand in hand. And this idea of who am I willing to be vulnerable with
Mm.
is foundational to the success of the partnership.
Phyllis, what's your key takeaway here?
And this is a technical one, but again, to help make this a more manageable process, don't hesitate going to trusted organizations like the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, because at that point, you already start to have a base level that this is a credentialed coach, this is somebody who has been trained, this is somebody who knows about coaching enough to where they could answer my questions. So I think that that can help put you at ease or give you a good understanding right from the beginning if you've not had any experience with coaching. And go to trusted friends and partners of yours to see if they can give you names of people that they have trusted, people who they have relationships with. So it's kind of, again, going back, you keep hearing the words trusted partners, trusted relationships, trusted organizations.
Very good. Well, my key takeaway is chemistry is everything here. That you want to establish if you're looking for a coach, whether you have chemistry with that coach, whether you can enter into that space of safety, of creativity, of confidentiality, of exploration. And to be able to enter that space untethered, unworried about whether you say the wrong thing, whether you misstep, or whether you know something or don't know something. Being able to step into that space becomes critical. And I think chemistry is one of those pieces that dictates whether that space can even exist. Good?
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree.
Well, thanks for listening, everyone. We love talking with you. And please talk back to us by leaving comments. If you haven't subscribed to our podcast, please do so on all the major podcast platforms. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us on Growth Beyond Boundaries. We hope today's episode gave you the inspiration and tools to push past limits and achieve meaningful growth. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Your support helps us reach more people on their growth journeys. Remember, growth starts with one step, one conversation, and one decision to go beyond boundaries. Until next time, keep challenging the limits and discovering your potential. See you soon.